Thanks very much, everyone, for coming. This is the first talk at the new building. It's great to have such a full room, and I'm told that larger rooms will be available soon. It's fantastic to have Bastian Obermayer and Frederik Obermaier, the so-called brothers Obermayer, although they're not brothers, from Süddeutsche Zeitung, and they were responsible for really one of the biggest scoops in modern times, and certainly the story involved the biggest leak of data that we've seen. I think it was 11.5 million documents and 2.6 terabytes of information, and a really extraordinary story that's told in the Panama Papers book. First of all, of how they got the story, and then how they worked on the story and worked and shared information with a whole lot of journalists around the world. And then land a really, really big scoop. So we're going to talk about that today. We'll throw it open to questions pretty soon. But Bastian, could I kick off with you? Where did it all begin?
Well, to be honest, it was a very bad day because my kids were really sick, and there was a lot of whining and vomiting. And I was a little tired, and late at night I got this message: "Hi, this is John Doe. Are you interested in data I'm willing to share?" I was interested, but at the same time I knew I had to get back to my kids and make tea and be nice, but you have to be...
I'm going to pass you this microphone to use.
Okay.
Perfect.
And you also have to be nice to a new source, because you have to have him, give him or her the feeling that you're really interested in what he or she wants to give you. So it was a lot of running back and forth and writing messages, and in the end we got a first batch of documents that looked really interesting, not exactly great or huge, but interesting. And it became more and more over the next days, and so it started what is now the biggest leak of all times, and it started with only a batch of documents in a bad night.
And when did you know that you had a story? Actually, could we get one more mic here? That would be great. Thank you.
Well, I think we knew that we had a rather good story when we found the name of the best friend of Vladimir Putin in the data, the godfather of his first daughter, and he was in the midst of 3 or 4 Panamanian companies, and we saw hundreds of million US dollar moved in there. And we found an interview of this guy, Sergei Roldugin, in the New York Times, where he's an artist. He plays the violin, and he told the New York Times, "I'm not a businessman, I don't know millions." So we were sitting there and seeing these millions of US dollar running through the companies, and we were like, well, either he lied or he lied. And this is when we knew we got a really good story, and it got better when we started finding those heads of states. In the end, we had like 13, I guess, that were directly named in the papers, and we had leads, meaning the bagmen, the brothers, sisters, sons of heads of states in a number of around 70.
Right. So, Frederik, normally you presumably went. Bastian took the story, the initial story, to your editors, and they put both of you on the story. And I think you'd worked on investigations in the past. But what the normal course of events with a scoop is that you keep the scoop to yourselves and then publish it and wherever else happens. In this case, you went down a very different route. Why did you decide to share it internationally?
Well, that's a question some colleagues asked us at that time as well, and they asked us in a not that polite way, more asking, "Are you crazy guys?" But we have been part of former investigations of the ICIJ. There was stuff like offshore leaks, Swiss leaks, and some investigation, especially Google may know, there was LuxLeaks. But at that time, we profited from other media organizations handing over data to the ICIJ, sharing it, and giving us the possibility to work on this. And for this time, it was like, and we were convinced that it's not only about taking, but also about giving. And furthermore, in this set of data, we saw that there are so many links to scandals all around the world, because in the beginning it was like when we found a new name, a new company, well, we Googled it, and sometimes we found some hits like, well, involved in a scandal in, let's say, Mozambique, and we were pretty sure from the beginning that we wouldn't be able to report on all these stories, because the German readership, for example, would maybe not be that interested in a story about a scandal in Mozambique, but it is maybe an important story for Mozambique. So we decided to share it, to give Dan, in this case, or in this example, a journalist in Mozambique the possibility to write about this, because the data may be the missing puzzle piece in a huge scandal.
And at that stage, did you have all the data in, or did it keep coming in extra bursts? Did you have all the data at that point, or did you continued to receive more as you went along?
That was at a stage when we had some 100 gigabytes of data, and we really thought, well, wow, this is a huge amount of data, because at that time the biggest leak we knew about was offshore leaks, and that was, I think, 260 gigabytes, and we had about 700 or 800 or something like that. And we thought, wow, this is such a big amount, and the data keep growing and growing. So we had to buy new hard disks.
Again and again.
Again and again. I learned that a hard drive from 2 terabyte on, you need a special plug for, because it doesn't work without electricity. And in the end, we turned up with 2.6 terabyte. And for me, it's still, I'm not that, as you may know, you're tech guys, but I'm not. I really had to look up what's 2.6 terabyte. And for me, it's like, still, well, it's big, but I still have no feeling for it. How big?
So talk us through the whole process of keeping things safe and using encryption and secure channels. Because the John Doe, you've never met John Doe, have you? And you don't even know who he is. But you talked very, very regularly to him, Bastian. You were talking to him every day for a long period.
Yeah, we had a long-standing relationship. We are encrypted communications, which we switched several times to be more safe, and we got the data in a way that we obviously can't tell now, but it was very complicated for me as a guy who has no clue about what I was doing there. And we took all kind of precautions that we could learn about. So we talked to many people who helped us. So we had an air-gapped computer. All the information were only stored on this one. We had a special room where our bosses were not allowed to get in, and no security, nobody except our team. Mm-hmm. And we had a safe where we stored all the hard drives in it, and we even had this nail polish, this glitter nail polish to put on this screws of the computer, so we could see if anybody tried to get in.
Mm-hmm. Very James Bond.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, and my kids loved the nail polish, but we really tried hard to do all to really protect our source.
So did your family know what you were working on at the time?
Not exactly. Well, if you say my family, I didn't tell my kids they are 3 and 5 years old. I could have told them. No, thinking back, they wouldn't understood it. My wife knew some, because she had to know if you're investigating Vladimir Putin and his buddies, you better tell this, because it could change your life. I mean, honestly, and I think in your case it was same, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I really tried to keep it as a secret as long as possible, because my girlfriend was working in the same business as me, and journalists are normally very talkative people, and so. But in the end, some month before publication, it was sure we were both convinced that we had to tell our partners what we are doing, because we had to speak about security measures, what even our partners had to take before publication and even after publication. So, for example, in my case, my family was not in town when this whole stuff broke loose and when we published it, because at that time we had no clue what could happen. In the end, everything turned out fine, but, well, we had to take precautions for the worst case.
Yeah. And this took many, many months to come together. So what were the precautions that you took to make sure that the story didn't get leaked, or that the journalists that you shared the story with would scoop you? I mean, you had hundreds of other journalists involved around the world. That's a scary process over many months, isn't it?
Yes, and the basic measure for us was being a pain in the ass, because we always told them, every colleague who was invited to this project, well, this is very important to keep it secret. Don't tell your girlfriend, don't tell your colleagues, don't even tell your boss what is in there. And that was not that easy, and the ICIJ was even more repetitive. They repeated it so many times, but in the end, I think all of our colleagues realized what this story is about, and that it's not only about some very technical issues and tax haven, trust limited, nominee directors, but it's about the lives, that there could be lives in danger. The life, first and foremost, of the source, John Doe, but then also of journalists that worked with us on this in the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa, saying in countries where it's not that easy to investigate stuff like, well, the best friend of Vladimir Putin or some drug cartels. I mean, these are all guys, for them it's not that hard to harm a person and a journalist. Yeah.
And the whistleblower came to you guys, and obviously a German publication, but he was very keen that the story would land right around the world. Isn't that right?
Right. One of the first, well, it was not a real condition, but it was a wish that, and this person said, maybe you don't only publish in German, because nobody reads German. And
so why did he come to Süddeutsche in the first place?
We don't really know. We don't really know. We know now because we have published his manifesto, as the Guardian did too, that he or she approached other news outlets too and didn't get the real attention of the people there. Mm-hmm. And Jürgen Mossack, one of the founders of Mossack Fonseca, the Panamanian company, he's from Fürth in Bavaria in Germany. So maybe this person may have thought, well, if nobody is listening to me, I'm going there where I see a local connection between this company and that country. And once you're looking in Germany for somebody who was involved in leaks or in tax haven stories, you would maybe go to Süddeutsche Zeitung because, as you said, we did offshore leaks and Luxembourg leaks and Swiss leaks. So this, if you're looking in Germany, it's kind of rational to talk to us. Mm-hmm. But we don't know why he chose to go to our country.
So tell us a bit more about Mr. Mossack, because he was a pretty secretive figure. What was his background, and what's he doing now?
Well, his background was pretty strange for us as Germans, because we looked how this German ended up there in Panama. Panama is very far from Germany. And we saw that his father, who was a member of the Waffen-SS, so he was a Nazi, and we kind of dug into the archives and found out that his father ended up working for this. I mean, he emigrated after the war, and he ended up in Panama, working there, it seems like being an informant for the CIA. And, well, his sons, there's not only one, but there are two, they studied, and Jürgen Mossack became a pretty famous person in Panama. I mean, I went there, and if you speak to the people there in the financial district, they all speak about El Alemán, the German, because he's famous, because he has very influential friends. His partner in business, Ramon Fonseca, was an advisor to the president. He was a member of the ruling party in Panama, so they are people you don't mess with in Panama. But at the same time, in Germany, they've been pretty unknown. I think if you would have asked somebody in Germany 1 year ago, who is Jürgen Mossack, it was like, Jürgen who? But now I think some people may know his name. So
Mossack Fonseca, what was their business model? What was their approach to selling offshore companies?
Well, officially they are a law firm. but their business is they are setting up offshore companies all around the world in whatever tax haven you name, and then they're selling secrecy. So you can talk to them. Well, I want it secret. I want it very secret, or very, very, very secret. And then they put in nominee directors, people that can pretend to be the real owners if they are asked. So it's like they are helping you to hide your money, and it depends on how much money you do have to hide your money and how much you want to put into this. They are offering you very, very complex structures.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's talk about some of their famous clients. You mentioned Mr. Putin's best friend, also David Cameron's father, senior executives at Siemens. How did you discover who these people were and where your stories lay?
Well, in the beginning it was really like trial and error. Because when we received the data, we processed it, like OCRing it and making it searchable, and then it was like, well, I put in a name. Bastian is a soccer fan, and he's a fan of a soccer team in Germany that is not that famous. It's from Munich, but it's not the big one in Munich, so he always Googled the players and former presidents of FC Bayern Munich. And we, of course, looked for Angela Merkel, Helmut Kohl, or the politicians. But then we soon realized that we have to do it in a more structured way. And then we put up lists, like the simplest one was like, well, all members of parliament since the founding of Germany, so the founding of the Federal Republic. And with this, we then looked for all the major scandals in the history of Germany after World War II. And looked for the people involved, the companies involved. And we had many, many hits. And still, so it was a mixture of making fun searches. And fun was like, well, we are here at Google, so who are the bosses from Google? Then let's search for them. And
We haven't done this yet, I think.
And doing the structured way as well.
Okay, and then let's talk about the impact. So when the story, you kept everything safe and then launched the story internationally on the same day. Tell us a little bit about what happened next.
Well, we have to start what happened before this, because I think 13 minutes before we broke it, Edward Snowden had it on Twitter, which we until now don't know how he did it, but he learned his job, so he knew what he was doing, I think. And so after this, it was like a tsunami that broke, because it was so many reactions from the whole world, and I mean, you're used to write something if you did offshore leaks and lux leaks before, but you're not used to having mass demonstrations in several countries because of your story. And Vladimir Putin accused us of being owned by Goldman Sachs, which is just a blatant lie. And Prime Minister stepped back, Iceland, and all that stuff. And we were like, for 3 weeks, we were in a tunnel and didn't have the time to read anything or to watch the films they were made. It was really a completely crazy time. And if you see Barack Obama in the White House talking about that after Panama Papers he has to change legislation, it's all like, did he really say this? And now it gets a little calmer, so we can look back at this and we can start reading pieces that our colleagues have written back then. So it was really very, very interesting what happened there.
And have you heard from your source? Have you heard from the whistleblower since the story broke?
Well, as we have published the manifesto, we can say that there has been a contact, and we know that this person we are quite happy about what happened and how it played out, but we do not comment if there's still any kind of contact.
Okay, right. And Mossack Fonseca, what of them? They were raided by the police from a number of countries shortly after the revelations were made. Have you heard from them? Are they continuing to do business?
They are They're trying. They had to close down 6 offices in 6 tax havens and their private banking department. But we don't know what will happen after the raids in Venezuela and El Salvador and in the main quarters in Panama. The raid I think took like 28 hours, but we would not be very surprised if their friends in government would tell in some months that they have really checked all and it's all perfectly legal and fine and no harm being done.
Well, and closing down the offices has, as far as Mossack Fonseca claims, nothing to do with the Panama Papers, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Pure coincidence.
Sure.
Yeah. Tough times. Okay. Questions from the audience. Who would like to ask the gentleman a question? Over here.
Please wait for the microphone unless no one can hear you.
So firstly, I would like to say that I think this is a great thing that this got leaked and that you wrote about this. After these papers were leaked out, I think a lot of people, including me, were really excited that things like that things might change in this respect and that these people would have to be taxed. But it seems that since the publication, nothing has happened on the global scale. So it seems that I'm assuming Mossack Fonseca is going bankrupt slowly, but overall, there's no changes in taxes or anything, or maybe I am wrong and they are happening. So what's your view on this? Are you happy with the things that happened since your publication, or were you expecting more?
Well, I mean, we are journalists, no activists, so for us it was like, well, we published it and now let's see what is happening and report about it. But I'm not that pessimistic because we have already seen some changes. We have seen Panama agreeing to be part of the automatic exchange of information. That's something they denied in the past years. We have the OECD discussing it. We have an inquiry commission from the European Parliament now. There are investigations in dozens of countries. So I think there's some movement going on. And we do hear from the offshore business that they are not feeling really good because it was also we reported only on one law firm and there are many companies offering the same services all around the world. We do see that they are feeling a little bit nervous because I think now they realized after all these leaks, I mean the offshore leaks, Swiss leaks, now this one, they realized that they cannot feel safe anymore. So if your business is selling secrecy, and you do see that there have been several leaks in this field, well, you should think about if it's still possible to keep your stuff secret. And I think we have to look closely now what is going to happen, and it's not only to us as journalists, it's to all of you to stick to this topic where I must admit that maybe at first glance not be that sexy, because speaking about tax havens seems technical at the first glance, but you always have to be aware that's an issue that regards all of us, because there are billions of dollars or pounds missing for all of us if taxes are evaded. And at the same time, it's not only about taxes, it's about criminals hiding their wrongdoings using offshore companies. It's people like the cousin of Bashar al-Assad evading sanctions by using those companies. So this is something that is very important for every one of us.
Next question.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to ask about, because I guess that the first impression, or I don't know, for many of us, was that this whistleblower was kind of a hero that revealed this, and now, because of him, we can know about the whole issue. Did you consider the possibility that the guy maybe didn't have like the good intentions? Like he was like whistleblowing the bad guys, but there were like even worse guys behind him or something like that. I mean, how do you consider whether this is a good thing to do or not, or if you care about it?
Well, first of all, we look at the documents, and if we see a public interest there, and we think they are not falsified, then we know we have to do the story because it's important. And the motivation is on second place, and still, I mean, we talked more than a year with this person, and we have the impression, and that's what we've been told, that this person feels a moral obligation to do so because he or she is capable to do it, to give this data away. And we talked a lot now to people who have very good insights in secret services, and they all say nobody would give away a weapon like this because you don't know what's in there. It's 11.5 million documents. No secret service would know what's all in there, and we got it in real time. So we got a bunches of 100 gigabytes, and we found emails from the day before. So it was not really possible to go through it and clear it for documents you don't want us to have, maybe. So I don't think that there is some bad intention from a secret service. We have been accused that we're working for the CIA. We've been accused we've been working for the KGB. There have been some accusations, the Mossad, because Mossack and Mossad, it's so close, and so we cannot be sure, of course, because if it's the Secret Service, you never know who's behind. I don't really know if the Secret Service, the CIA, is secretly paying this guy here. I don't know. He says no, but I don't really know because it's the Secret Service.
But did you cooperate with the authorities in any way? I mean, if crimes were committed, is there any responsibility to hand over documents to the authorities?
No, we don't do this. They have their chances and their possibilities. They can do raids anytime. They can do better laws. They haven't done their homework for years, and if they want to go after offshore, well, they can do. This is not a problem. They have special polices. They have all kinds of weapons that we don't have. And if the whistleblower wants to have it done, he can give the data away to authorities. But this is not our job.
But I mean, what we are actually doing is that the stories we published on our website, that we are trying to put as much original documents on our webpage, and the authorities can, of course, use them to start their investigations.
This is Google, and one of our missions is to kind of look at data and analyze and understand it. And the forefront of that right now is artificial intelligence on computers, where computers can go and understand the structures of documents and find meanings and things like that. And have you guys considered or approached anyone that has artificial intelligence expertise that could do automated analysis of the Panama Papers?
I'm glad that you didn't ask, can Google have it over there? Yes, actually, we had somebody approaching us on that in a rather abstract way when we already worked on the Panama Papers. But at that stage, we couldn't tell the person, well, we have something on there. Let's go in and try it. But I had a lengthy discussion with this expert. It was a German one, on an abstract way, already knowing, well, we would have something. And I didn't get the impression that it's already, I'm not the tech guy, that this is a field that is already so far developed that it would be very, very useful to analyze the Panama Papers.
We have some machine translation that kind of, you can take things and translate it into other spaces and things like that.
That's something some colleagues of us already used, for example, to analyze the documents. It's no secret. It's our Swiss colleagues who have a very great tool on that.
But if you look at WikiLeaks, they took the decision to put everything out there, and people could make of it what they would. Did you consider that approach? I mean, you cherry-picked the stories. You didn't put all of it out there, did you?
No, I mean, of course, we thought about that as well. But for me personally, it would feel, and it is, in my opinion, it wouldn't be responsible regarding the source, because I personally could not be 100% sure that in this bunch of documents that there are no links to the source named John Doe. And if somebody is looking for John Doe, and I'm sure that there are some guys out there who really would like to meet this person and not meeting for a drink, that, in my opinion, that wouldn't be responsible. And furthermore, according to German law, this would not be possible, because in Germany we have a rather strict law of privacy. So putting all these documents in an unredacted way out there would get us in court nearly every day for the future years. And redacting this bunch of documents, I mean, that's too much. So, and as much as I would really like to do something like that, I want to investigate stories and not redacting documents for the next years. Millions. Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Hi, thank you for the talk, and thank you for the excellent journalistic work. I'm wondering if you're at all worried by a phenomenon that seems to happen where, since the leak, there has been an increase in support for fringe and extremist political movements, sometimes financed by exactly the people involved in the leak, somewhat paradoxically. And if you're worried about this, what could the press do against it?
Well, I haven't linked Boris Johnson to the Panama Papers yet, but if you say so. No, I haven't seen a relationship between this yet. We have to think about it, but what do you mean, for example?
It seems that since the leaks, there has been support in most institutions has eroded because people trust it less, and they think that all the governments have people in them who appear in the papers, and that drives people to vote for extremist parties or right-wing parties, sometimes financed by people who appear in the links.
Well, I think
example, in UK, there seems to that Aaron Banks appears in that list, and he's a backer of UKIP. And UKIP is using the Panama Papers to get the support, somewhat paradoxically.
well, I don't think that we started the erosion in trust of politicians. It's maybe one more small piece that many people think, the elites, the 1% is having a separate life, and the powerful and the rich, they can really decide if, when, and how much taxes they want to pay, for example, and we cannot change it. This is what we see in the Panama Papers, and this is what you see in many places if you look there, and so we need the big parties to fight against this phenomenon, and not saying, the others are using this now. They should be using it themselves and should be really going for change. That's my opinion, at least.
Next question. Over here.
So obviously the kind of investigative journalism you guys did is a huge public benefit. But I would be curious if there's anything you can share about whether it actually kind of financially works for newspapers, which I think is often a concern. Like, obviously you spent months working on this, you probably had to hire lawyers and technical consultants. It's a very expensive thing. Does this result in, do you see a higher circulation? Does it pay for itself, or is it basically a loss leader for a newspaper to do this?
Well, what we did see was actually a higher circulation. We did have by far more access to our web page. It's no secret that our servers broke down in the first 24 hours because there have been so many people reading the articles of this newspaper in Germany. And it was the first time in the history of our newspaper, for example, that the English articles had more access and more clicks than the German articles. But regarding facts and figures in regards to money, we don't have any figures if it really pays out, and I really hope that our bosses do not start this calculation like, well, this Bastian worked more than a year, he did cost that, and then the computers, then we see some more clicks, because we really believe that investigative journalism is not something you should value with, more clicks and more circulation. It's about the duty we have to do to society, and we want to uncover wrongdoings and stuff that should be out there. And if we only value journalism on regards to clicks and stuff like that, in the end we will only be publishing pictures or videos of cats, and that's not what I want to do.
And is there something in the collaborative international model of journalism that signals how the future of journalism might work in a more sustainable way?
Well, I think that what we all saw, and Süddeutsche Zeitung especially, is that it really boosted our reputation, and so the name was not really out there, before. And if our colleagues, our correspondents were asking for interviews, they mainly heard, "Where are you from? Süddeutsche Zeitung? This is the country, next to Albania that has free press too, cool." And so now they can say, newspaper that made Panama Papers, and it made, and we see this on many of our colleagues who said that Swiss leaks and Panama Papers have really helped them to further develop their ideas and what they were doing, but it's not a sphere where you make high profits from many things. It's more something that you can help build a good name for your newspaper or for your media or whatever you work for.
Next question. Yep.
So you mentioned that Panama has agreed to exchange information for the first time after many times asking. What do you think this means for tax havens everywhere? Do you think this is gonna send a signal that this is probably information that they should have publicly available, or do you think there won't be much of a difference in the future?
Well, it all depends on our politicians, and while being the UK, there are the British Virgin Islands, and there's Guernsey and Jersey, so there's a lot of work to do. And I think the pressure has never been this high. It's a little sad that Mr. Cameron left office, because he was especially under pressure as his father was included. But I think that we will see change, but we cannot really judge now how much. And I think that the very easy way of using offshore with all the banks, or the big German banks used in the last year, that you go there to, example, Deutsche Bank in Switzerland, and you say, "I have this 500,000 euros and I really hate taxes." So, and they would say, "Yeah, I've got this idea. You just buy a Panamanian company, you get a bank account here in Switzerland, and that's it." And this doesn't work anymore, because the banks are really afraid of bad publicity, and nobody knows who's next in terms of being leaked. So what is happening now, if you go there with the 500,000 euros and say, "I hate taxes," they look at you and say, "Well, that's your problem, but we cannot help you." But if you go there and you say, "I have 50 million and I really don't like taxes," they say, "Well, we'll find a solution, and you'll have 15 lawyers setting up a very complex structure involving Luxembourg and Ireland and I don't know what. And in the end, the government needs 50 lawyers to really decide, is it legal or not? It's on the edge, and this is, you will never stop this, I think.
Have you exhausted the 2.6 terabytes, or is there much more to investigate within the data set?
Yes, we didn't have it exhausted, because it's so many documents, and I'm sure that there are thousands of documents still in there where no journalist of this 400 even clicked on it once. But I hope that we have at least the biggest stories already found, but there are so many stories and leads we are still following, and there are fields that have not been covered that much as they should have been in the past. So that's the reason why we added, and the ICAJ added, more reporters on it from countries, for example, recently from Mongolia or from Turkey. So our Turkish colleagues published their first Panama Papers story today, and I'm pretty optimistic that there are still some great stories coming out of the data, and we still have to say that there's so much data coming from the 70s or end of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, what is basically facsimiles or handwritten documents. And although we believe we have a pretty good OCR systems, I'm pretty sure that there are so many names in there that have not been OCR'd in a very good way. So there could be the Pope and his brother in there, and we wouldn't have found him now. And I mean, I hope that in the end there are so many journalists working on it that we will find the real big stories in there, but that may take some time.
And are you still both working on this full time? Is this your job at the moment?
When we are not speaking to you, then yes, we don't do any other stories apart from that.
And that presumably is going to carry on for some time to come, is that right?
Well, I hope that our boss will let us, and don't remind him that there may be other stories out there as well.
Next question.
We have one in the back.
You said you had to tell your family about the story before, like a month before, because you were worried about their security. Since the story broke, have you ever felt you were in actual danger, or was it all good?
Well, we felt in danger while we did all the research, because this is the phase where you're most vulnerable, where nobody knows, out in the world, what are you doing? And when people think they might be able to stop you. So this, after we published, nothing happened in Germany. So we didn't have any threats, no calls, no emails, no letters, aside from legal letters from lawyers who said they want to sue us. But nothing really happened. And we had worldwide, our Russian colleagues had to leave the country for a time, and a colleague in Venezuela has been fired, others have been intimidated, but nobody was harmed until now, so this is really good. And we have the biggest protection of all of us is that we are so many. Because we can say the sentence that now I think 460 colleagues have access to the data. So if you want to stop one of them, you'll have 459 very, very angry colleagues doing exactly this story. So it's not possible to stop it anymore, and it's like a life assurance, at least we hope so, for many of us, because it's so decentral and so globalized.
And are you being sued by anyone? Are there any active cases against you?
Yeah, there's one guy in Germany who's a little crazy, and he's suing against the newspaper and the book again, and a broadcasting station. It's a private investigator, and he thinks that we put his life in danger. And we don't think so, and this is before court now. But it's he's fighting very small sentences, like which car he drove back then, back like 30 years. It's not really important. It's not an issue. It's not a big problem for us. And we really had the big fear that some broad billionaire would sue us in London or New York. So we would really need to pay a lot of money to big lawyers, to expensive lawyers. And if if a billionaire's in the mood, he can sue us in London, in Zurich, and in New York. And this would have been really a problem, especially if we would had make a larger mistake. Our biggest fear was to make any real mistake that we have to go to court for, but we haven't found one yet, and if we don't tell now.
Fine. So given that you're not being sued, can you say a little bit more about Mr. Putin? Because that case, that was an extraordinary case, wasn't it? So we have a cello player who is moving hundreds of millions of dollars around the world, and he happens to be the godfather of Putin's child. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, first and foremost, it was interesting to see that not even Putin questioned the authenticity of the documents. He said he thinks they're authentic. He doesn't like our interpretation. And then he came up with the story of Süddeutsche Zeitung being owned by Goldman Sachs, what was actually wrong, and his spokesperson had to admit that mistake, what was a great page one for us, because the Kremlin doesn't say sorry to Süddeutsche Zeitung every day. And it was funny to see that the wife of the spokesperson was in the Panama Papers as well. So, I mean, still, apart from the fun, it is still an extraordinary story, in my opinion, because we do see that it's still developing. We published the story, and afterwards we found more links. We found links, for example, to the biggest tax fraud in Russian history in it, and we didn't see it at once. So, and there are still colleagues of us working on this case, and the explanations of the Kremlin, of this musician Sergei Roldugin, they are not the best ones. I mean, we do see him in the center of a network of companies that funneled around $2 billion in not that many years, and the explanation was that, well, this guy is buying some instruments. And with that amount of money, you can really buy an army of instruments. So I think that's not that good of an excuse for it.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the presentation and thanks for the amazing work that we've done there. Just regarding the procedure of the release of the documents, do you have a feeling that John Doe learned from the lessons of previous releases, like thinking of Julian Assange and Ed Snowden? Like, surely he must think, like, I don't want to end up in some hold up in an embassy in a foreign country or elsewhere. Was there, did you feel, or did he insist on certain protocols to keep him safe?
The answer is, I had the impression, yes. I mean, we do see Chelsea Manning being in prison. We saw Snowden being trapped in Moscow. And I think, at least I had the impression that John Doe learned the lesson from them by not telling anybody who he is. I mean, it was not only keeping it secret from the public, but also keeping it secret from us. Because you can put a pistol on our heads and we won't be able to say the identity or the name of John Doe because we don't know it. And I think in these times, I think this was the best way of staying alive and staying free. And I think, unfortunately, it is the only recommendation I can give a whistleblower in these times. Because we do see so many whistleblowers being in trouble. We saw just recently this week the LuxLeaks whistleblower facing court in Luxembourg. And I think whistleblowers should not be the ones facing court. They should be the ones we all should applaud to. And I hope we will all, politicians will learn the lessons and realizing that there's a need for a better protection of whistleblowers because it's all of us benefiting from whistleblowers that risk their lives by handing over documents to journalists or to authorities. And that's the reason why we should really fight for a better protection of whistleblowers.
Last couple of questions. So, 360.
So the stories that really make the headlines are, of course, the ones where a major public figure, such as a head of state, is involved. But for every major public figure, there must be lots of not well-known names in those papers. To what extent have the stories that have come out do they just represent the tip of the iceberg, or is it really mostly sort of major figures who are involved in this tax evasion?
No, it's the upper tip of the iceberg because you have the many persons who use Mossack Fonseca and are not famous, so we are not allowed to name them. And then you have the many other companies like Mossack Fonseca having the same kind of clients. So it's really depressing if you think about it. And it's but still it's not we would in some way like the authorities to have the data, because then everybody can be looked after. But we don't know what will happen. Maybe John Doe wants the same thing, and maybe he gives it away. And if not, we just have to look for stories with a certain public interest, so we can publish it.
Final question.
Okay.
Hi there. From reading the papers, do you have the impression that everybody working at Mossack Fonseca was aware of what was going there, or only few people in the company was actually aware of all the bad stuff happening there?
Well, I think that most people knew, because what do you think that are anonymous companies in Panama are used for, if not for people who want to hide their traces in some way? And we see a lot of stuff where they were talking about the cousin of Bashar al-Assad, and they were like, hey, he's sanctioned, shouldn't this be a red flag for everybody here? And yes, it should have been, but they just ignored this red flag and kept him as a customer. And we see many examples where they just didn't care. And they did so because they were really sure that nobody could get them, because it's all so secret and nobody can look into. So they weren't in each case really no other way around. They didn't want to know a lot in many cases. They weren't really interested. They were just giving away, the company with its name, made a bank account, and didn't ask many questions. But we see many examples where they saw what the money was used for, like in a big Siemens bribery scandal, and they completely knew where the money came from, and they just didn't care. And we have many examples of this, and I think the whole field, the many people working in the offshore company, in offshore companies, they know what it is used for, because it's common knowledge. So it will not come as a surprise for the people working there that they are used for tax evasion. That's what it is for. That's what it's made for. So I don't think that we have to be very careful about the people working there. Although the smaller guys, of course, they are not as guilty as the big guys here.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, Bastian and Frederik, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.